This fifth part is called the emergence of life. I'm just going to start. Somewhere along the evolutionary time frame, life came into existence. It was the first sign, is the first sign, known to us of the cosmos becoming more autonomous, not relying solely on the laws of physics for movement and transformation. Life evolved over time, becoming more autonomous, so less and less reliant on just the gravitational pull of big planets and galaxies, and more on things like physiological cues and emotions and desires. That took time to develop, but it was progressing towards, at least progressing towards that. It began as plants in the water and evolved to what we now call animals. Life first emerged in water, and life adapted to the water, using it for its own growth and making it a vital substance to its own survival. It eventually adapted to fit the terrestrial environment, and land animals emerged. This was likely due to the waters becoming too crowded with predators, making the land a safer place to venture. Then animals evolved eyes to see the terrain they navigated, instead of relying on other senses like sound, touch, taste, and smell. They might not have all had those, but instead of relying on other senses, they gained a new one, which increased their chances of survival. A fifth sense, or an extra sense, provided them a higher chance at survival and ultimately at reproduction, at least for the first creature who developed them. Eventually, animals, or at least one line of animals developed an increasingly larger and sophisticated brain, leading to the rise of Homo sapiens, humans. So, this section is outlining the beginning of life to humanity, and there's a progression there. And we actually need to follow that progression. So, what happened was there was the first sign of life, and I think that the first form of life was asexual, so it could reproduce on its own. And reproduction is very important because if something can't reproduce, then it ceases to exist. And for some reason in the cosmos, it seems like that's something to be avoided. Like it seems that non-existence is a bad thing. Maybe not like bad, like in the moral sense, but like it's bad as in you want to avoid that. Like the state of non-existence is less preferable in some way, depending on how you define preferable or better or whatever word you want to use, whatever terminology. There's non-existence and there's existence, and we want existence. Why that is, there maybe isn't a why, but we just know it's true and that we should go that way. And that seems to be what life was doing. So over time, it evolved, and it evolved to better fit its environment. It evolved so that a way it would continue to be. And if not it, then at least something else, right? At least that the first species gave rise to all species. It at least kick-started it all off. And it didn't just stay one species, and that happened because, DNA changes over time, so a species evolves over time. And it evolves because the environment is constantly changing. And because the environment is constantly changing, if you stay the same, you die. And death is equivocated with non-existence, and therefore it should be rejected. Okay, and so we evolved over time. We transformed over time to fit our environment so that we would exist at least longer, but ideally for the longest span of time that we can possibly exist for, because really at no point is death for a species wanted. It's really not wanted. I mean, it's complicated when you get to the concept of, do we want the cosmos to go forever? Because there's the idea of the heat death and all of that, and we kind of have to deal with that, like the fact that we're pretty sure like it's a decently established theory, or maybe even a fact, that there's going to be what's called the heat death of the universe, where there's going to be a point, I think like 100 trillion years in the future or something, maybe even longer than that. There's going to be a point at somewhere in the future where no matter will be able to form, and that we can essentially equivocate with non-existence, with the universe not being. Although there is stuff, it's not the universe, right? There's no matter, there's no us, there's no planets or galaxies or stars, there's no Earth, there's no humanity. And we kind of have to deal with that. But for now, I think it's sufficient enough to say that death and non-existence is to be avoided at all cost. And that might sound scary, but I'll probably just explain later that that's not scary and it's actually good. Okay, so we evolved over time to fit our environment, and at some point in that evolutionary time frame, human beings became conscious of the cosmos, and we are the only known creature that we know about. We're the only creature in the entire universe that we know about that has developed consciousness, at least to the degree to which we have developed it. I mean, there's some of that, and like octopi, I think maybe some other animals, like there's a bird, I forget what it's called, but it's a highly sophisticated bird. But there's no animal like us. There's no animal like conscious human beings. There's no animal that sees the world like us. And so it's kind of like evolution, or the cosmos, the universe, or God, or whatever, took a chance with humanity. Like it made us conscious of the universe. And so there's the idea that genes change randomly, and they change randomly because they need to change, and maybe it's complicated to change it where it needs to go, and so it just happens randomly, and then the people with bad mutations don't reproduce, and the people with good mutations do reproduce, and so the good mutations continue on, and we evolve over time, and we get better, and we fit our environment better, and we are updated genetically speaking, and so that's all good. And so life is progressing with a similar principle that we discussed in the last video. So this is kind of like an extension to the last video, but it has to do with life, and it's bringing us to humans. It's bringing us all the way through there. Now we're still going to be talking about things. We're still going to be talking about evolutionary concepts, but we've gotten to humanity now, and that progression is there in order to maintain life across the longest span of time. We're changing and developing, we're having mutations, we're evolving so that we can fit our environment and increase the chances of our survival. The underlying spirit of creation, of transformation, of evolution, whatever you want to call it, it seems to not like the idea of life going extinct, which can be like equivocated with non-existence, right? So it's trying to avoid that, and that's going back to the fundamental principle. So the human's natural instinct, most of the time, the natural instinct is to both survive, but survive for the purpose of reproduction, which is something we're going to be talking about across the next few videos.